It's the JumpLeap Long Term Podcast.
Episode 23.
You are in the middle of a strategic planning retreat. Your colleagues have come up with some great ideas for the future and have put together several interesting alternatives. That was the fun or the easy part. Now you must decide which ones to proceed with in a limited time. And no, you can't do all of them. But how can you compare them one against the other so that you can make a very smart decision? They each have different sub strategies. So, this is an important choice about the destination and the reason why it should be pursued. The retreat can't progress without making some difficult decisions. Tune into this episode to hear from me and my special guest, Dr. Peter Compo, as we tackle this wicked problem together. I'm Francis Wade, and welcome to the JumpLeap Long Term Strategy Podcast. And welcome back. And as you can see, we're joined by our special guest, Dr. Peter Compo. And before I introduce Peter, I'd like to say a big welcome to you if you have never listened to this podcast before, especially if you've not listened before. Because you may ask, what kind of podcast is this? This doesn't sound like what I'm used to. Well, the differences are, I don't know if there are many, but they are intentional. In that I've not invited Peter to come on and be my subject in terms of having an interview. Instead, we're going to be trying to solve one of the most difficult problems when it comes to defining strategy, the choice between alternatives. And the way we're going to go about doing this is by doing a heck of a lot of diagnosis of the issue, following the Einstein dictum, where Einstein said that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes trying to solve the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. So Peter and I are going to go back and forth, tearing the problem apart. And part of why we're doing this is so that you or participant or our audience or listener can hear our reasoning. You may not agree with all of it. You may like bits and pieces of some parts and not the others. But you're going to hear some of the thinking that we are applying to this particular issue. Long before we get to what we think the answer might be. And, for problems like the one that we're dealing with today, there are no sort of final answers. So our objective is to sort of arrive at some serendipity. And what I mean by serendipity is that one of us says something that neither or the other one has not heard before, sounds brand new, and then we'll ring an insight bell, which means that, we have bucked up on an insight or an interesting point of view that's fresh, perhaps. Maybe we'll even find a few that no one has ever heard before, ever on our planet. So to cue us up, let me tell a quick story about Arturo. So he happens to be the CEO of a mid-sized company. He's in the middle of a strategic planning retreat, and the team has crafted 4 separate descriptions of the organization's future. Each one is made up of words and numbers, and they describe an outcome all the way in 2040. It's been a fun process so far. Lots of brainstorming and back and forth and kind of conversation that bright, smart people like to have with each other. But now the team must choose between the alternatives. And so far it's been slow going. These 4 alternatives are distinct, but there is some overlap between them. In a prior retreat several years ago, he remembers that the team combined 2 alternatives into one, and it was a nice compromise. However, in this situation, that's impossible. The 4 future visions can't all be pursued at the same time due to limited resources. Plus, there are some conflicting ideas between them. Fortunately, the discussion has not been too heated because no one seems to be defending any particular vision yet. There is a growing sense of impatience. So he slips a note to the facilitator, his name is Jorge, and says, "What can we do to speed this up?" Jorge looks at him with nervous eyes because he doesn't know. He looks as if he hasn't seen this situation arise either. But in both of their minds, separately, they have the same thought. There must be a better way to resolve this than just continue an open-ended discussion of opinions. Because we have an hour or 2 left before We need to move on, get this thing done. So Peter Compo is the author of The Emergent Approach to Strategy. Awesome book. With a background in music and a PhD in chemical engineering. He spent 25 years at EI DuPont in a wide range of leadership positions. His mission is to create a new level of strategy, theory, and practice. Peter, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Did I forget to add one word in the end there? A new level of theory and practice, strategy, theory and practice, clarity.
No, yes, you did forget. You gave me that bio, didn't have the word clarity in it,
I'm
but
sorry.
that does make a great deal of sense. What do you make of the Arturo case? Let's just jump right in.
Well, I make of Arturo's situation that, on a few levels, he's got a few issues, right? He's got to convince his team that there's a connection between the future and their decisions today and what they're thinking about doing today. He's got to find a way to connect them and get them excited about that and get them feeling that tension. There may be different cases. He may not know it himself. He may just believe it, but he has to find it, and he's looking for the team's help to do that. And maybe, yeah, sure.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and qualify that a bit. Let's take the pressure off you just a touch.
Sure.
And say, let's assume that they are excited and they do see a connection between a theoretical future.
Mm-hmm.
So they like future building, this team does, and they see a connection between the decisions that they make and the future that's coming. So let's assume that's a given, because and by the way, folks, if you're listening, you've been in retreat, that's not a given. Because
right.
Half the room could think that this is a waste of time. That half could be all into it.
Most of the room could think it's a waste of time. Absolutely.
It get really hairy in there. But let's assume that that's not the case. So let's put that one to the side and say they are invested. But let's
okay.
Go
so
ahead
if
with what you're
invested, you said something important. They have four concepts for the future. And Arturo realizes that there's no realism in just accepting all four. Resource constraints could even be conflicts between them in the market, could be conflicts in the brand and in the direction of the company. But he believes that, right? That the four are not acceptable to be just accepted as a four-part approach to the future. So he has that challenge, and it sounds like he's got the goodwill of the people to work it out. So it's a technical problem. It's a real, how do we diagnose this problem then?
Well, let's say he has the goodwill, so they've been following along because they've done the easy stuff. In a way, the brainstorming is the easy part. But there's a lot of strategies out there that look like, what you say in your book, they look like a list of good stuff. And it's like everything under the sun is thrown into the basket. And there's no choices or decisions made as to priorities. And there's certainly not that, okay, we're going to do A and we're going to kill D. So D is now dead, and anything to do with D we'll never pursue, and we're not going to put any budget behind it. So that kind of clear, definitive kind of outcome is, I don't know if it's rare, but I see a lot more strategies when I walk into companies and look at their existing strategies that look like that list of everything under the sun. And there's no coherence. There's no attempt for it to be coherent. There's just kind of what Arturo experienced before, which was just, well, let's just compromise and do all of them.
No,
it's kind of like that. Let's put on a show, kind of Mickey Rooney kind of thing.
Maybe, yeah, maybe every 9 out of 10 quote strategies that I've ever seen are lists of sub goals, plans, initiatives, strategic initiatives. What's a non-strategic initiative, by the way? I don't know what a non-strategic, so I don't know why we need the word strategic. They're mostly lists. It's easy to write down lists. It makes everybody feel good. Everybody got their bullet point up there. But
Hope you're enjoying this free excerpt from the JumpLeap Long-Term Strategy podcast. Interested in finding out more about getting a subscription to full episodes? Visit www.longtermstrategy.info.
the problem is that there's no integration. There's no challenge to resource constraint. There's no thought about how these various programs conflict in the marketplace and how they confuse the brand and how they confuse the organization. So I think that's a given that that the list is not the answer. But even you're set up with the 4. You know, someone could say, hey, look, why can't we have 4 major initiatives in our company? I don't deny that that's a possibility, but have they really looked? Have they really seen whether there's resource constraints between the 4? Have they seen whether or not there are conflicts between them? Confusion in the marketplace, putting too much burden on organizations to have to serve multiple masters. I think it's very unlikely that a company with one group, let's say, you know, with one organization is going to have 4 equal programs going forward. Don't rule it out, but I would have to be shown how they all make sense together, and that actually the strategy would be the higher level thought, the higher level rule that brings them together and makes them all work together.
Right, let me complicate things then.
Okay.
Well, why not? So it's the case that they're at the level of not complaining, but they're about to contend between 4 different outcomes. So it's the aspirations that are in contention. So below that, of course, there's the programs that support the aspirations, but they haven't yet agreed on the aspiration or the goal or the outcome. They have the 4 of them kind of sitting there, and they all have their pet outcomes and they have their pet initiatives that support those outcomes. And they're used to thinking about the initiatives because people in companies think more about initiatives than they do outcomes. They think about what they're doing rather than the end goal. That's more like the CEO's job, or it's the board's job, or it's somebody else's job. But now it's their job. And we're saying they have to choose between the outcome as well as the initiatives to support it. So it's harder in a way than, because you could fund an initiative thinking that, oh, we'll just throw money at it because it's just money and it's people and it's time, and you could just decide to throw some resources at it and kind of waste, take 1 for the team and 3 you really care about, the 1 you really don't. But to keep the peace, we'll do that one as well to keep people happy. But you can't quite not, well, I guess you could, but you can't quite do the same trick if you're at the level of competing aspirations, can you? Or tell me your thoughts.
Obviously we're talking abstractly. We don't have specific aspirations that we're discussing, but often, there is an overall goal, an overall vision of the organization, and that there can be sub aspirations as part of that and sub goals, but there would have to be proof that they all work together, that they are sensible together, and that they're realistic and reasonable. So there's a whole process there to think about that.
Right. So that's what we're hoping to tackle today, which is what's the way that we could help Arturo and his team decide which destination is the one that is worthy of, worthy of investment, worthy of emotional commitment. It's one thing to want the retreat to be a success. It's another thing to say that success must be a particular outcome, because you really do need to walk into these situations being open to what might happen because of the group dynamic. The group dynamic may take it to a different kind of aspiration than the one the CEO had in mind. I've seen that happen before, the CEO or anybody else, but focusing on the CEO, he or she has something in mind that they think should be the ultimate. And it turns out in the conversation that doesn't really turn out to be the ultimate, which means that they know, do they force what they want? Do they engage in a conversation back and forth in which all parties are open to something better emerging, something like jazz? Or do they kind of drive it in some way, or do they try and build a coalition? These are all the questions, and there's no real answer to like the right way to do it. But it has to be done, because there's no way to make progress without leaving the retreat or leaving the discussion with having everybody on the same page. And I think just being in Arturo's shoes as he's watching the conversation unfold or not unfold, there's some anxiety. I've also experienced top executives being pretty impatient about wanting to get to the answer, and maybe get to the answer quickly because they don't want a lot of kind of navel gazing and beating around the bush. And maybe ultimately, there should be a way to compare these alternate pathways with each other in a way that is at the same time logical, but also takes care of the social side of things, so that you don't call for a vote, for example, and the majority just dominate the rest, and oh well, bad luck, you're the losers today, and by the way, this will show up in your this will be in your record that you voted for the wrong solution. How does that sound so far, Peter?
I think what you've done is thrown out several possible scenarios, cases that a leader could be in. I mean, the leader, Arturo, may not know the answer, may be truly unsure of what's the right thing to do, and is looking for the group, right? Looking for the team to bring thought and help to answering the question. It may be he has an agenda, and he's looking to, he wants to lead everybody to believe that they were part of the decision, but he's trying to get the agenda to go through. I mean, it can be he has a belief about what's right, but wants it challenged. I mean, there are a lot of cases that this could be, and I suppose there would kind of be different approaches for each one of those different cases. I mean, I think the ones that's the most interesting is Arturo has thoughts about what's right, but wants them challenged, wants the team to feel involved, wants the best possible output. And that means creating a dialogue that's hard.
You've reached the end of a complimentary clip from the JumpLeap Long-Term Strategy Podcast. To hear the full episode, go over to www.longtermstrategy.info and grab a subscription or a free trial. See you there. And here's a clip from our next episode with Dan Bruder.
Yeah, and we have to ask the question, why don't we include employees in this process? And there's a lot of different answers to that. One answer is as simple as we don't really respect our employees or their opinions. we think we know it all. And that goes to the thing you said, kind of the executive elite category. And, strategy is too complex and it's too important for everybody except for the top, 10, 15 people in the company. That's one reason. The other reason is it's not impossible, but if done correctly, it's very, very expensive.
And if you like the work we're doing, feel free to follow us at our website, strategyconf.fwconsulting.com, or like or leave a comment on one of the popular podcast apps, such as Stitcher or iTunes. This is Francis Wade, and I'm signing out from the JumpLeap Long-Term Strategic Planning Podcast. See you later.